You know the old saying, find a problem, sell the solution. Well, this guy did just that. Let's talk about it. Welcome to my channel. This is the story of how one man lost his fortune because of a single dollar. The year is 1881 and our protagonist, a 22-year-old kid named Samuel Insull, is living in London. By day, he works as an office boy for a printing firm, and by night he studies accounting and engineering books by candlelight. You see, Samuel has big dreams, bigger than his current position as an office boy, that's for sure. But to get there, he needs connections. Enter Thomas Edison, the greatest inventor of the age, or so everyone thought. Now, if you're familiar with Edison's story, you probably know that he invented the light bulb and made innovations in motion picture technology and recorded sound. But what people don't realize is that behind these innovations was another kind of genius, the business genius of Samuel Insull. See, before any of Edison's inventions could change the world, they had to first become marketable, which is where Samuel came in. While working as Edison's personal secretary, Samuel performed two crucial roles. First, he kept track of Edison's finances. There were always tons of expenses to account for when testing out new inventions. Secondly, Samuel managed and organized Edison's projects. He facilitated communication between departments, oversaw schedules and deadlines, and helped make sense of all the moving parts. This combination of organization, accounting, and engineering made Samuel incredibly valuable to Edison and the entire company. And thus, their partnership would go down in history. But eventually, Samuel would go out on his own. So let us fast forward to the year 1892. Samuel moves to Chicago to take over the Chicago Edison Company. And within a couple years, he transforms it into a massive energy giant called Commonwealth Edison. All throughout the Midwest, farmers were hooking up their farms to the grid for the first time. Street lamps were lighting up major cities. Factories were running double shifts, and homes were seeing electricity for the very first time. Samuel's empire was growing fast. But instead of cashing in his shares and riding off into the sunset, Samuel reinvested in more utility companies across the country. By 1907, he owned companies in 13 states. But then he started buying up utilities in Europe. Within a few short years, Samuel's empire would grow to stretch across 3 continents. So now let's jump ahead again to the 1920s. Thanks to innovative technology and some great financing, Samuel is able to control nearly every major utility company in 32 U.S. states. And even though he doesn't own them directly, he owns enough shares in the parent companies that he can call the shots. This system of interconnected companies is brilliantly designed. And in fact, it still exists today. It's called a holding company. Instead of owning 100% of a bunch of different utilities, Samuel owns shares in 100 parent companies, which in turn own shares in thousands of utility companies. He created one of the largest financial networks in the history of the world. To say that Samuel was wealthy would be a horrific understatement. He owned tens of millions of dollars worth of stocks, real estate, and bonds. But most importantly, Samuel lived a very humble lifestyle. He never spent money on fancy cars, clothes, or vacations. He kept his work schedule and ate breakfast at McDonald's every morning. He loved efficiency, numbers, and the mechanics of industry. He was also a devout Christian who believed that hard work was a virtue and giving back to society was a duty. And sure, this sounds like we're writing a hagiography, but we actually laying out the groundwork for how the public reacted when Samuel was falsely accused of corruption. In other words, Samuel was perfect. We all know the saying, A plus B equals C. Well, Samuel was a squared plus B cubed equals C cubed. But then everything changed. During the 1920s, Samuel became obsessed with the idea that someone was going to come along and break up his holdings company, which up until now had been operating without any problems. To prevent this from happening, he hired armies of lawyers to draw up complex contracts and fine print that would allow him to buy back his own shares should anyone ever try to take them from him. It was an absolute nightmare to deal with. But fortunately, Samuel never had to deal with it because nothing ever happened. Then came 1929, otherwise known as Black Thursday. Suddenly, customers were withdrawing their money from banks, companies were defaulting on loans, and Samuel's own customers were starting to freak out about their investments. By December, his own company was losing $10 million per week. To prevent panic, Samuel borrowed $70 million from several banks. But he knew that wouldn't be enough to save him forever. So he drew up another plan. Now, Remember all those protections that Samuel put in place to stop someone from taking his company? Well, he had forgotten about one critical detail. He had forgotten that he himself was someone. And thus, if he played his cards right, he could trick his own protections into allowing him to buy back his own shares. Samuel executed this plan and transferred the majority shares in one of his holding companies to himself for the nominal price of $1. But the problem was that the public didn't understand what had happened. They only saw Samuel selling his company for a measly dollar. And suddenly, newspapers around the country were publishing the same exact headline: "Invincible in $1 stock deal." Eventually, Samuel realized that he couldn't fight the media on this one, so he simply paid no attention and focused on saving his company. But unfortunately for Samuel, the damage was irreversible. People began pulling their money out of Commonwealth Edison, and soon Samuel was forced to file for bankruptcy. The board of directors removed him from office, and the company was liquidated. As for Samuel, he fled the country. Now, we've said it before, and we'll say it again: hindsight is 20/20. If Samuel had simply ignored the media, he might have been able to weather the storm and carry on as usual. But instead, his fear caused him to act irrationally, and soon he was trying to flee to Europe. After a series of mishaps, Samuel ended up in Turkey and desperately tried to leave by stowing away on a boat. But he was caught and given a small fine, which he paid in pennies. After learning that there were arrest warrants out for him in multiple countries, Samuel surrendered to Turkish authorities and agreed to be extradited back to the U.S. Once back in America, Samuel's trials began. He was accused of selling off his company for a measly dollar, of lying to shareholders, of refusing to testify, of betraying public trust, and of stashing money overseas. These charges carried hefty sentences totaling 20 years in prison and tens of millions of dollars in fines. But the surprising thing happened. Samuel was acquitted on all counts. It's a bit of a plot twist, isn't it? After all, we've spent the entire episode talking about how Samuel made his fortune. And now it turns out that he didn't commit any crimes? Well, here's the thing. In reality, Samuel didn't break any laws, but he did break trust. He circumvented investor protections, flouted fiduciary responsibility, and refused to cooperate with investigators. He had acted out of fear and desperation, and the court understood that, but they couldn't ignore the evidence. So in the end, Samuel was free to go, but his company was gone. He had lost everything. He had nothing left. In fact, he was worse off than when he first came to the U.S. with only a letter of recommendation from Edison and dreams in his head. When he fled to Europe, he had less than $50 in his bank account. So now in 1938, old and alone, Samuel suffers a fatal heart attack in the Paris subway. He'd been trying to catch a train to Brussels, but he never made it. The irony of dying in a subway station owned by the very people he once helped electrify is not lost on us. We think this story is a great case study in reputation management. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, do well to like and comment. Now that's a wrap for today. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an exciting episode. Until next time.